Hi, this is Eneasz.
Hi, I'm Katrina Stanton.
Hi, I'm Steven Zuber.
And this is the Bayesian Conspiracy!
Yay!
Dun, dun,
And we're gonna have music at some point here. You're doing the music?
dun.
Excellent. So, this is, as I've been telling people, a conversational podcast for people who are rationality adjacent, in the rationality sphere anyway, but are not smart enough to be really the hardcore leaders. Okay.
That's not fair.
Is that not fair?
No.
Okay, so let's cut this out and start over.
How about more casual?
Okay. How would you introduce us?
This is staying in, by the way.
No, this is not staying
This is
in.
totally staying in.
Oh, you guys suck.
We're working out what the show's about. So
Yeah, no, everyone's gonna be bored hearing what the show's about.
Oh, everyone's going to be bored anyway.
Oh, damn it. They're never gonna listen again.
no, this will be fun.
No, we gotta cut out this boring part.
Now that it's gone on this long, we may have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Congratulations.
Sorry. Hey, you gotta win somehow, right? Sorry.
No, I think the introduction was fine rather than the stupid.
I should not say the stupid
Don't
part.
call
Okay.
people. I don't think that we need to call people stupid. I think that is
Yeah.
antithetical to what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah, this for people who are interested in rationality. There's tons of podcasts out there for skeptics, which, and I'm willing to defend this. I think is like rationality 1.0 and or rationality is like skepticism 2.0.
Okay. I could say
and
that.
I don't see that there's much out there for rationality audio consumption. So, yeah,
We'll see if this sticks.
we'll find a way to put that all together.
No, I thought that was pretty good what you said.
Cool.
Oh, I thought it was good too.
Yeah, we'll use that.
Oh, that's cool.
Everyone will probably hate it.
The other,
It's
well,
possible, but in the meantime, we can have fun and we can chat about rationality topics, how they apply to our lives.
That is what I'm hoping for.
we'll take the risk of public chagrin in stride.
Yeah.
But the thing with Julia Gayle's podcast, which is great, check it out, Rationally Speaking, but it's not about rationality in general. It's sort of, they'll pick any random topic and talk about it at a level that a rationalist can enjoy, but it's not about rationality in general. And this isn't going to be about that, I think, every week forever, but, so like second most recent Rationally Speaking episode was on false memories. And
Cool.
yeah, it was awesome. It was with Elizabeth Loftus, who I actually saw give a talk at the Amazing Meeting. And the reason I brought that up is because Julia in the podcast was like, I think I saw you talk at something once. I was like, yeah, Julia, we're at the same thing. There's I think the first episode they try and tackle what is rationality, that was years ago and I don't remember even what they said. So
Yeah.
that's not really the focus of their show.
Oh, so we get to go from scratch here.
And we're staying on scratch for a while anyway.
I do assume that most of the people listening to this will have some exposure to the less wrong rationality type tools. But this won't be a complete new thing for them.
Not some of my friends.
No?
I
Okay.
can't imagine how they'll stumble across it otherwise unless someone shows it to them. But hopefully this isn't their only exposure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully even with minimal exposure over time, listening to this podcast, you'll be able to pick up some things.
Right.
It's kind of the hope, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And since we haven't mentioned straight up, there's a long series of blog posts on a website called Less Wrong. And this is we're aiming to be Less Wrong inspired, but not a Less Wrong podcast. So it's not necessary to have deep familiarity with the website or anything, but we want to be, I don't know, I'm picturing sort of like the level of discourse in the comments.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
We'll see. We'll be drawing heavily from Less Wrong
Yes.
source material, along with probably other blogs, which we'll hopefully cite correctly.
We'll try.
Try.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I grabbed some definitions from them. So we'll be using those as we go on.
Do we want to jump right into that question that we got?
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to mention was about the about citing other sites, sources and stuff. There will be on the website in the episode descriptions. We'll have links to more or less everything we talk about in every episode, especially
we should tell
links
them
to
where the website is.
Oh yeah,
Oh, the website is the Bayesian. Okay, the BayesianConspiracy.com. And I guess every time we put up an episode, we'll have links to relevant things.
you bet.
Okay.
Thanks for setting that up.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks you guys for maintaining it.
Eneasz did 90% of the legwork of setting the website up in exchange for us doing the maintenance work later. So,
Yes.
Oh man. All right. So do you want to introduce this question?
Yeah, sure. This was fantastic because we were talking about setting up this podcast. We were trying to figure out what our first topic would be. We're like, hey, let's introduce, our favorite rationality tool. Then like a day later, I got this email that was a very good intro question. I was like, hey guys, I don't really know the answer to this. I sort of got an idea, but it's actually a fairly hard question for a fairly basic thing. Let's start with this because this would be a really good way to start off the podcast. And the two of them said, yeah, we think that's a great idea. Yeah, so here's the question.
It's a multi-part question, and it starts, is there evidence that a rational approach to decision-making, either on the personal or institutional level, will be more likely to achieve desired outcomes? For example, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality implies that a perfectly rational decision-maker will do a better job than a very smart and informed ad hoc decision maker, but I don't understand why this should be the case. After all, the Bayesian priors for any real-life problem aren't available, and if you're estimating, how are you doing better than somebody using their knowledge and intuition? I don't include empirical decision-making as inherently rational here. So, for example, if GiveDirectly were the best charity I see, that is more of a data-driven outcome than a rational one. Obviously, the two are not mutually exclusive, so I could be missing something.
That's really long.
We'll tackle it piece by piece.
Yeah, you want to just do the first line?
But okay. I wanted to say really quick. Hey, do you have this person's name? You didn't put it in our forward.
I did not put it in the forward. No, it's it came to me on Reddit, so it's their Reddit name. And I will credit them later.
We'll give you a shout out on the website because I think that's awesome. That sounds like a
good and complex question.
Yeah, that sounds like I would assign a non-zero probability to that being Eneasz in disguise to see if you actually to see if you knew what you were talking about.
Really?
This is the test.
No, that was because that covers like everything. That is. You
don't give the right answer, Harry.
That's the kind of intro question. Like to, like a 101 class that would just really piss off the instructor because it's like, well, I was going to teach, but we'll just cover this one question for 90 minutes because it's that in depth. So,
yeah.
But I think it's great. So, yeah.
Is Eleazar often going undercover and?
Oh, he is secretly everyone in the Bayesian conspiracy.
What?
Yeah. Just with different voice modulators.
But if he was, we might. If he was, we wouldn't know, right? So.
Right, and he can neither confirm nor deny that he's actually all of us.
Fair enough.
Great.
Until we get him on the show.
Oh. But then that could be him playing the, deeper game. Double obfuscation.
Okay. Do you want to start with the first sentence?
Let's do it.
Is there any evidence that a rational approach to decision-making, either on a personal or institutional level, will be more likely to achieve desired outcomes?
Did you say you had some research on this?
I said that I was aware of some research on it, and I did check into it again recently. Julia Galef runs the Center for Applied Rationality, and one of their object level goals is to acquire more research on exactly that question. So they did. They're doing a longitudinal blind study of a statistically identical group of basically the way it works is people who wanted to be. They took a bunch of applicants who wanted to come to CFAR classes, and CFAR is short for Center for Applied Rationality, and then took half of them. And so then they compared the base demographics and stuff, made those all the same. And last time I checked, they are still doing the research. So they
what are they trying to find out? What is the difference between the two groups?
I think they want to check measured life success, probably self-assessed life success. They wanted to compare it to self-reported happiness levels, and that sort of thing.
So the idea is to see what the difference would be between the success and happiness of somebody who was interested in applying rationality in their lives and people who were not?
No, it's everyone who's interested in applying it, but people who were formally trained.
I see.
Then again, that's also assuming that the people who didn't get into CFAR classes aren't going to go on and self-teach themselves. So they're going to have to qualify.
How many freaking variables is that?
A lot. But Julia's I think she has a master's in statistics. So.
Oh, well, then I should trust her.
And they have a team. Yeah. Well, we can trust that they at least are aware of the problem. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But as far as answering that question, I was hoping that the research had been completed, but it's not. So, anyone have any anecdotes or other research?
Well, my immediate knee-jerk reaction to that question was that's what we're going to be talking about, is how we can apply the methods of rationality to things in our daily lives and to get a better outcome than otherwise. Now, I think now is maybe a time when we should talk about the different types of rationality. So what kind of rationality we are actually referring to.
Before we do that,
okay.
Because I wanted to jump in with my my thing on it
That's
too.
That's
fine. So the question, whether the rational approach to decision making is better or not, I'm not sure there is really a rational approach to decision making. I've always thought of rationality as more of a toolkit of ways to think and ways to make sure that you aren't doing a terrible job fooling yourself, or I guess a really good job fooling yourself.
Is that not a rational approach?
Well, that is, I don't know if that's a rational approach. Like, when I think of rationality, it's like the tools to make sure that you have good info, that you aren't pulling from biased sources, that your own, mental proclivities aren't pushing you in a way that you don't want to go. And so that seems to me like you're laying the groundwork for decision making with the rational tools.
Little column A, little column B.
Okay.
Because I think that sounds exactly like an approach.
Yeah.
Like, so it's I made the analogy to skepticism earlier. I'm not sure what someone would say the skeptical approach is, but it's basically, it can be summarized in one sentence of having a reasonable standard for evidence. Right. So then they'll take that and then work from that framework. All right, what's reasonable here? What can I safely assume or whatever? How outlandish is this claim or something?
Like when he asks, what's the rational approach to decision making, I want to contrast it right away to what's an irrational approach.
Yeah, exactly.
And that I don't think that's fair to him, though, because then he says down that his alternate is what is that? Smart,
ad hoc.
Smart,
informed ad hoc decision making.
See, and I think the
How
smart.
Is that not?
How's that not rationality? The smart part is gaining data, and informed ad hoc is making sure that your ad hoc rules, because no one can analyze every single thing all the time. You develop good heuristics, and you test those every now and then. Heuristics is like rules of thumb, I guess. Should we point that out?
Yeah, heuristics, right? I think are they're mental shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
or cognitive shortcuts.
You develop good heuristics, and you test them every now and then to make sure that they're still working and that they're good, and you alter them as you need to. But that's all a rationality method.
Well, we're going to get to rational and potentially irrational heuristics in just a moment. So, but yeah, this is a good question, and I think that we're probably going to be spending every time we podcast answering it.
At least a little bit. It can tie back to everything. So, yeah, I like the idea of what's an irrational approach, because short of like literally like tossing a die for every problem that you can think of, but then again too on what you assign for each of the six decisions. If you're throwing a 6-sided die, some of those can be way more outlandish than others, right? So if it's rational or not, right? It depends on what your goal is, right?
Right.
And it depends on if it makes sense to use intuition, to use effect heuristics, to use those shortcuts to make that decision, right?
Yeah.
Given the situation, and sometimes it absolutely does. In fact, probably, maybe even most times, it makes sense to use some of our mental evolutionary shortcuts to make decisions. But using rationality is kind of getting over those mental shortcuts for times that they don't work.
Well, so that's why we have the heuristics that we do.
Yes.
Because they're beneficial most of the time, right? But it's when they reliably fail. So part of rationality is knowing the circumstances under which your heuristics are likely to be poorly calibrated. But what you described, Katrina, was partly, I think, adjacent to two kinds of rationality, and that's a good segue. There's instrumental rationality, which is, I guess, achieving object level goals.
Yeah.
And epistemic rationality, which is finding the truth, or I guess a reliable way of finding or trying reliably to find the truth.
Yeah.
Thanks to Less Wrong, I actually have a couple kind of full definitions here.
Right on.
And you're absolutely right, of course, Stephen. But I kind of like the way that they explain it, or the way whoever wrote this explained it on Less Wrong, which you can find in the Less Wrong wiki. So, instrumental rationality is concerned with achieving goals. More specifically, instrumental rationality is the art of choosing and implementing actions that steer the future towards outcomes ranked higher in one's preferences. Your preferences can be all sorts of things, anything you care about. Whereas epistemic rationality is when your goals are truth and knowledge, specifically. So those are goals in of themselves, right? Whereas if you're talking about instrumental rationality, you could have falsehoods, and that could be part of achieving a different goal. Think politics.
Or something less inflammatory, like physical health. Like, I want to be healthy. I want to be healthier. Like, that's your object level goal. So, like, how are you going to go about doing that? So, like, you can watch Oprah and get your health advice from Dr. Oz, or you can buy any book off the shelves. It's probably less reliable, or probably more reliable than Dr. Oz, but less reliable than other sources. But, you know, the thing is that you can look at, this is my goal, and you, with careful definition, you can say, all right, how much closer am I getting there? You know, I guess what exactly are my health goals?
Well, rationality, I mean, we disparage Dr. Oz, of course, for good reason, but rationality also helps you realize why you should disparage Dr. Oz and go with someone less crazy.
Who will actually probably help you. This is a place in which truth and having good, accurate knowledge will probably help you get healthier.
Right.
I agree. Maybe that was a bad example.
But we also want to explain how rationality leads you to the concept that Dr. Oz is not a reliable source.
I feel like that's even easier than hard rationality, and that's just skepticism. Well, I guess it's rationality too, in that you can look at, maybe it's useless drawing that distinction all the time, but how reliable is this person in general? Mm-hmm. And then, okay, now what's this new claim they're making? Well, how much should I trust that, given A, what I already know about the human body, or his reliability about something?
I think I have an example of one of the different kind of rationality. So, instrumental rationality, let's say that your goal is to be best friends with Dr. Oz. At that point, again, disparaging poor Dr. Oz, the truth isn't necessarily going to be helpful in getting to that goal of being best friends with Dr. Oz. It might be more useful for you to hold similar opinions to that person.
Yeah.
That's true. I guess you're working, but within a framework of, you want to believe true things about what it takes to be best friends with Dr. Oz.
Again.
But you know what I mean? So, like, you might believe, okay, well, this fruit tonic that he's selling probably won't cure my cancer, but I'll pretend to believe that because it'll help me be his friend, right?
I think actually this is getting to the root of the guy's question. That sometimes if your goal is to become friends with Dr. Oz, it's better not to be rational. Or this Dr. Oz scenario is kind of ridiculous, but the one I enjoyed much more from Less Wrong is the Bayesians versus barbarians conundrum. If you're in an all-out war for survival, you kind of want to place your bet on the barbarians because they don't care if they live or die. They're going to go out there and fuck shit up. And if, however many of them die along the way, that's fine. Whereas the Bayesians are more likely to be kind of like, oh, I don't want to necessarily risk my life for this. And at least that's, the common perception. And I also do not want to join the military for similar reasons. But the answer that Eneasz proposes is that if the Bayesians do that, they will lose the war. And they will see that, and losing the war is a very suboptimum outcome. So the rational choice is not to lose the war. That would be irrational and, can I say stupid in this case? Because losing a war is kind of stupid, right?
If your goal is to win, sure, yeah.
Only if your goal is to win.
All right. And so the more correct answer is for everyone to see that the way to beat the barbarians was to take some percentage of them and self-modify to becoming irrational and barbarian-esque while they're, out fighting this war until it's over.
Yeah, so from personal life, this is a good time. I feel like there are plenty of times when it doesn't make sense to be super rational because it might cause discomfort with the position that you have to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a job in which you disagree with actions taken by your boss, then it might be time to put those niggling little doubts away for the goal of being happy in your position.
Isn't it rational to do that, though, if your goal is happiness over being right?
Well, yeah,
Right.
that's the example.
That's the point. It's meta
That's
rationality.
instrumental, right. So
You
it's
have
instrumental rationality. And I mentioned politics before. I've been in plenty of environmental lobbying situations. And as a rationalist, sometimes people use approaches that are uncomfortable to me, make statements that I don't feel are adequately backed up. But when the goal is changing people's minds or getting people to come out to vote or something like that, sometimes being false actually helps with that.
Yeah, I think that's
outcome.
going dangerously into dark arts territory, though.
I didn't say
Because-
I liked it.
Well, once the people find out that you've been lying to them, it's going to backfire on you.
Yeah, I think people are used to that.
I'm
I think
tough
they
there.
should be.
Because, yeah, on the one hand, it might be worth even possibly that fallout if, like, say the bill's already been passed or something. If they find out that you were not being if you weren't being completely genuine in your campaign, well, whatever. My side already won, so you guys can try and revoke that law, but it's already there. That'll be harder. So
See, I think the loss of goodwill and the animosity you build is not going to be worth that.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is falsehoods are a lot more subtle. It's not that, it's more of differences of opinion and maybe things that I might personally think are poorly supported opinions that are pushed to the forefront of messaging.
fair
Right?
enough. Yeah,
So
especially,
it's a little bit more subtle than all that, and
that sounds like about as honest political campaigning as it can get, right? And I don't mean that like as a jab at all, but like that. I mean, focusing on the things that we all agree on is kind of like the only way to get people to like stay on board, right? So, and not pointing out like the small areas or the disagreements and whatever. Am I missing something?
No, I mean, you don't have to focus on the disagreements, especially when you're trying to build a consensus. But on the other hand, I think once you stop caring about the truth in order to pursue your agenda, then the truth is forever your enemy. And you don't want to be on the wrong side of reality, because eventually it's going to win.
so here's what people actually do. They rationalize, right?
Mm-hmm.
They convince themselves that it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they already thought it was, but they don't want to hear any evidence otherwise because it's better for them to continue believing something that works towards their goal.
But the whole
Right?
point of the methods of rationality is to get over that sort of thing and not believe things just
Yes.
because you want to believe them.
Right. So which brings us to what we're going to try to focus on, which is epistemic rationality in pursuit of the truth rather than in pursuit of goals. Although I think that some of the topics that we're going to get into, they are going to involve other goals in addition to truth.
I like them both because I probably use rationality more as instrumentally than I do empirically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the most part, I can get a reliable picture of something from Wikipedia, and that's if I'm just trying to get a base idea of whatever's going on or what the general truth consensus is on something. But
It depends on the article.
it does, but and I'll find the study and link to it in the episode description. But there was a study done, and Wikipedia as a whole some years ago, and I can't remember any of the details, but it'll be there. Had fewer scientific errors, I think, in the mid 2000s than Encyclopedia Britannica.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Does Encyclopedia Britannica still update?
I don't know, but the idea was that to anybody who says like, oh, it's all up for anyone who goes up and edits it, but I think they have like a board of thousands of volunteers and some paid people who go through and monitor edits and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not just anything. Although
Wikipedia is remarkably accurate.
But
as long as you stay away from like hot topic political.
The more controversial and the more obscure the page, the then those will be way harder to get truth on.
I know somebody who added an entry for a Lovecraftian beast.
Okay.
Right? Lovecraftian elder god or old one or whatever. And just watched as metal bands started naming their bands after it.
Nice.
And it was just added a completely false one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bummer. And then, of course, Stephen Colbert was all happy that he
saved the elephants.
He increased the elephant population by having everyone who watches the show say that they were their populations were skyrocketing.
It was a thing that he did to have all his fans go into Wikipedia and edit it up.
Elephants specifically.
Elephants specifically, yeah. That due to Stephen Colbert's influence, elephant populations were rising.
On Wikipedia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously they reversed it.
Yeah, of course.
But for a little while.
And just letting us know that all of our information is unreliable. And maybe...
It's not unreliable, it's just, it can be manipulated, which is true of any information.
It is.
It's of varying degrees of certainty.
That's why I said all.
Okay.
Not just Wikipedia.
Okay, sorry, yes.
But, and I'm sure this is somewhere in the comments on that wiki page, but I haven't gone through them. But I think that in a lot of ways, epistemic rationality is a necessary condition for instrumental rationality.
Mm-hmm.
At least in a lot of cases.
You can't manipulate reality if you don't know what is real.
Exactly.
I see.
So, like, again, using just a vague example of, like, I want to lose 20 pounds or something. If your idea of how that works is like, well, if I only eat in the morning, then I should be fine, right? Yeah. But you want to know the truth behind that claim before you just go for it to help you better achieve your goals.
It's also why I don't think that you should, tell people not the truth to manipulate them, because it's inherently a hostile act. You're sabotaging their map of reality for your, purposes. And once they find that out, they are not going to be terribly happy with you. Because you've taken away their power to alter reality by, giving them a wrong idea of what it is.
Not if everybody believes you.
No, because then reality still hasn't altered. Unless it's a social construct.
Yes. A lot of things are social constructs.
Okay.
We're going to run into a lot of that.
If everyone took Wikipedia's word for it in the elephant population, should we have stopped worrying about it?
Well, the elephant population exists at its number no matter what Wikipedia says or what people believe.
Right.
I know.
Right?
So the elephant population is not a social construct, you're saying?
Exactly.
Oh.
But speaking of painting... So for me, lying is saying to yourself, I have a better grasp on what this person's view of reality should be than they do.
Yes.
And there are some cases, I think, where that could be true. If somebody's not sound of mind or otherwise in some distress, that could help temporarily. But I have in mind already an idea for somebody to bring on as a guest who will defend the position of lying.
Okay.
And we didn't get that far when we were talking about it, but I couldn't bring her around to the idea that, like, no, I think that would still be a mean thing to do. And she
Who is this person?
I don't know if Shelley?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Is she pro-lying?
Yes.
Which
is weird because
she has a lot of very interesting positions, but I don't know if she would.
She might come on and defend lying for us. We'll see.
Okay, well, that would be very nice of her.
So there was another line. I'm not sure if we're ready to move on. And I guess we can take it in order. I think the one I was thinking of was further to the end. So
next line of the question.
Okay. So the next line is, for example, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality implies that a perfectly rational decision maker will do a better job than a very smart and informed ad hoc decision maker. But I don't understand why this should be the case.
Do you want to?
I wanted to actually just jump in and summarize, I think, the last section neatly, which is there's lots of anecdotal evidence supporting the idea that people who make the effort to train themselves rationally more efficient at achieving their goals.
We didn't actually give any anecdotal examples, though.
No.
I mean, it intuitively makes sense to me that if you know what reality is and how to manipulate it, that you'll be better at doing that. But, I mean, we didn't actually demonstrate that.
And in summary, we don't have any research we don't have any large-scale research to back that up.
In summary, we don't have any evidence to back up our position on this. But But we want some.
Well, so like
it seems almost crazy to think that the opposite would be the case, though, that you can just do whatever you want without regards to the rules of the world.
Well, that's not what they're saying. They don't say
That's true.
whatever you want without regard to the... That's this next sentence.
Very smart and informed ad hoc decision maker.
A very smart, informed, ad hoc decision maker. Why would a perfectly rational, in fact, decision maker do a better job?
See, I think a very smart and informed ad hoc decision maker is basically a rationalist.
Except when he throws in perfect.
Right, well,
because then I'm thinking, well, then that person wouldn't need to ad hoc justify anything because they'd get it right the first time, every time.
And wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yes.
I mean, it's like the Bayesians versus barbarians thing. Oh. A perfect Bayesian would be able to, self-modify to want to be crazy while on the battlefield, right? But we can't, because humans are very difficult to modify. So we allow for a little bit of irrationality and violence in the population in general, so that if we need to call up on that, we have it there. You allow for some irrationality to exist, so that you are more flexible overall.
Whoa.
That sounded like a bigger claim than the barbarians versus
it does.
Bayesians. But
do you not think that we accept more violence in society than we should necessarily?
I don't want to go into.
Yeah, I think that's too big.
I think that's too big of a topic for right now.
And I'm not sure what accept means. Like, accept that it exists and that there's nothing I can do about it because I'm just one person, or like accept that. I think
he's talking about
like keep it there on purpose.
Who we send to war to fight our battles for us.
I live next to a fire department, so if you guys can hear the siren, it makes me feel like actually Rationally Speaking records in downtown New York City. So every single time they're recording, you can hear police sirens, so which is great when you're driving.
Every time you hear that, you know that you are safe from fires.
That's right. And there's EMTs literally right on the side of my balcony.
Thank goodness.
So yeah, just in case.
Yeah.
Okay, because my arm just went numb.
Oh.
Which one? Because I think heart attacks present differently in females than they do in males.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, it's little known, but apparently
I was going to say left because I thought it was left.
And I think in women it's like, actually I should know this because I was shocked to hear this when I first learned it, but yeah, it turns out that the symptoms of a heart attack are taught male-centrically, that it presents differently in females, and now that I don't know how it presents differently, that knowledge is basically useless to me.
That's shocking. I can't believe that the medicine is so sexist.
What I was thinking with regards to the ad hoc explainer versus the perfect, I guess,
rationalist.
The perfect rationalist, is that the ad hoc explainer will have a better toolkit to understand what went wrong, and hopefully be less likely to make those mistakes in the future. So like if you realize that you trusted this source because you liked them a lot or something, for whatever reason, then you found, oh no, they were radically wrong in all these things. If you're realizing that ad hoc, you can try and update how much you'll trust somebody just because you like them in the future. So you'll be forced to make less ad hoc justifications later on.
So are we assuming that the perfect rationalist actually has no previous knowledge, or has a different amount of previous knowledge of what went into making a problem or an issue or an obstacle that needs to be overcome?
I think we could save the perfect rationalist discussion for our episode on MIRI, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, because I think the perfect rationalist would be a super AI.
Yeah, I think the perfect rationalist first of all would have a lot more prior knowledge than we have. It
and
wouldn't
processing
come into
power.
anything empty. What?
And processing power.
And processing power, yeah. But I think having a ton of foreknowledge is part of what helps make you rational. But I also think that this podcast is more for people who are not perfect rationalists, aspiring rationalists at best.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to optimize to that level on the podcast, but it's an interesting question. Like a lot of the ad hoc heuristics we come up with are pretty decent, and would devoting all those resources into making a perfectly rational decision maker really make that big of a difference?
Or would it just waste resources? So maybe now is a good time to talk about a couple biases that there are rationality tools to kind of get us by.
I want to do that too, but the only thing I wanted to add to the last thing you said, which I've already slipped on the exact wording, but I'll find a way to put it together nicely. That part of the aspiring to be, I guess, perfect rationalist, whatever, but being more rational in general is I want to look back day to day, year to year, and think the thought, man, that was stupid of me, less than I used to. And to me, that marks improvement. Is if I'm not looking back and thinking, man, I was a fool.
For X period of time in the past.
Or like, just less frequently rather. Right? So, I mean, there'll be times, if I'm encountering something new or I should have done this better, but I don't want to be constantly thinking that.
I see. Okay.
I don't want you to have to edit out even more stuff by getting sidetracked.
Okay, so there's a couple of things that we wanted to go over, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the effect heuristic. So this is kind of the bias that there are rationality tools in order to help us get by. So effect heuristic is any time that a subjective emotion about something acts as a mental shortcut. We have a couple examples, and one of those is the halo or horns effect. Thinks less wrong. And so in this case, the halo effect would be if you think that somebody is a great person, you really like them, then they can kind of do no wrong. Mm-hmm. Right?
Like if you think someone is smart, you'll think they're more attractive. If you find someone attractive, you'll often think they're smarter, they're better morally. Just all good things tend to shine and make the other good things look even more good.
And all they say is true. So you're more likely, to believe them. And a lot of those make sense, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of the bummer, right?
But there's no reason that someone 2 inches taller than me should be more credible in any single, area.
Or like in general, just as like just average sampling, like in every single area.
Right.
So like attractive celebrities, people take their words on everything. Right. And even to use like less obvious examples, like, staying clear of Jenny McCarthy and anti-vaxxing, like you can get the Nobel Prize in chemists. People apparently ask these people, like, what's your thoughts on like the Middle East conflict?
Yeah.
Like, why would I know anything about that?
How do you feel about the blacks? Don't answer that when it's a trap.
But as far as being able to just dissociate yourself completely from, I guess, emotional affect to any problem at all is going to be really, really hard, if doable at all. But I think the goal is to be aware of the bias and then try to prime yourself against it.
Yeah, and we're going to get into a couple tools. I just wanted to... Oh.
I ran across the horns example really recently when I was over at dinner with my parents. Someone brought up George W. Bush, and we're a fairly liberal family. And I was trying to say, look, not everything he did was awful. I mean, the guy sucks.
Listen, Hitler had some good ideas.
Right, no. No, but like he apparently had a really good AIDS program that helped out in Africa quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And the unnamed person that was sitting next to me was like, yeah, well, fuck him and fuck that stupid AIDS program, and didn't, it's like, no.
It must have been bad because that's a bad person and we don't like him.
And I'm like, he is a terrible person, but come on, he did a good thing, right? You can give him his good thing.
He might even be an okay person. I've never met him or even known. Even if I'd met him at a conference or something, it's not like I know him as an individual.
Right. Everyone's nice personally.
I've heard a lot of people say that he's a nice person personally.
Sure. Yeah. But yeah, so it's who the unnamed person sitting next to you didn't make an effort to calibrate against the fact that they hate George Bush versus assessing the effectiveness of the AIDS program.
Yeah, well, and I will say I was greatly exaggerating for story effect just now. It's not that they said fuck his AIDS program. They started coming up with things like, I'm sure it wasn't that effective, and it could have been a lot better than it actually was, merely because he ran it and the person didn't actually have any data to back any of this up.
That's actually a stronger, I think that's a more interesting case than the hyperbole that you gave, because that's immediately not saying, well, screw him and screw everything he did. It's saying, I bet that sucked because he did it. Well, yeah, that's the best example of the horns effect there is.
Mm-hmm. Like, if we had a different president, he could have done the AIDS program better.
Right.
I'm like, maybe, but he did good.
I feel like this happens to all my exes.
Explain. That they think bad things about you, or
yeah, but I'm gonna turn that around to have me thinking it instead.
Okay.
Because I think it's rude the other way. Anyway, so when you break up with somebody, I think sometimes for some people it might take a while to remember that there were good things about them, and that that it's not all terrible, and they're not a terrible person, and they're a normal human being, and
that can be a bit of a survival strategy too.
Yes.
Because when I broke up with my wife, my first wife way back when, we stayed friends, and then eventually we kind of got back together again, and that was just a clusterfuck because the reason we broke up is we were not good together. And so we lost another 2 years with the whole, getting back together, and then, I was like, no, the second time we broke up, I was just like, I'm done with you. Everything about you is horrible, and I can't be near you. And then I was actually able to go on with my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes, these heuristics.
Shit, is that an example of where it's rational to be irrational?
That's what we're saying. Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Or rather, not necessarily rational, but helpful, because it's not rational to be irrational.
Right.
It is a helpful survival technique to be
Yeah.
irrational.
And because I know she is actually a pretty good person all over. We can't be together because we might fall back together. And I guess that's like meta-rationality, because I made the decision to be, about her.
Everything doesn't have to be rational.
That's what I was going to say, though, is that your goal wasn't to properly, in that moment, wasn't to properly assess, is this person, a good person or not? It's, I don't want to be miserable with this person. So what do I need to do to make that happen? Well, if I express to myself and to her that I think that, she's terrible and I never want to be around her, that should get the job done.
Yeah.
So
I don't know about you, but one of my goals is to be a kinder, better person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where rationality can actually, or rather these rationality tools can really help. One of the ones is the principle of charity.
It's a good one.
this is my favorite.
Technique in which you evaluate your opponent's position as if it made the most amount of sense possible given the wording of the argument. And again, this reminds me of arguments maybe with a significant other or a family member where you get into a place where you want to misinterpret, or you're angry and you're hurt. So it's not that you want to, but you misinterpret everything they say to be the worst possible meaning.
And you see that a lot on the internet too.
It's so sad.
It seems to be like the main reason you should never read the comments.
Uh-huh.
Someone
Like,
says something and
that's
everyone
not what
is
they meant.
Yeah.
So there was a quote that I really loved about this from a Less Wrong post that I came across years ago, and I don't think I found these regularly, but it was linked to somewhere. And it was, if you're interested in being on the right side of disputes, you'll refute your opponent's arguments. But if you're interested in producing truth, you'll fix your opponent's arguments for them. To win, you must fight not only the creature you encounter, you must fight the most horrible thing that could be constructed from its corpse. And that person's username was Black Belt Bayesian. So that's a good example of steel manning, which to me I think is like principle of charity 2.0, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the definition of that I pulled from Less Wrong, I believe, is a straw man is a misrepresentation of someone's position or argument that's easy to defeat, while a steel man is an improvement on somebody's position or argument that's harder to defeat than their originally stated position or argument. I personally, and when I've used this before, I don't think it has to be better than their originally stated argument, but I think that it makes sense to pull their strongest arguments and go up against those rather than their weakest ones.
It's game time. Can we steel man the question that we got?
From that person?
Yeah.
I think it's too complex.
I feel like it's pretty solid on its own. Plus it's complex, but we can give it a shot. I don't know. It didn't seem like it didn't seem ill-formed or anything like that, right? So, like, to me, like, steel manning would be, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a really non-inflammatory example, but it's hard to.
I think we have been. I think we've been trying to characterize, we've been using the principle of charity, and we've been trying to characterize the question in ways that we can address, right? In ways that, oh, well, do they mean this? Well, that would make sense. Do they mean this? That would make a lot of sense. And we've also, at least I certainly haven't, and you guys have too, we've been disagreeing with, we've been making arguments and then, well, what situation would it be the best thing to not behave rationally, right?
Yeah.
So, we've already been playing this game.
Yeah, I think that might be less of a game time thing and more of like a welcome to the show kind of thing.
Do it all the time.
I mean, it's especially when you're coming across like a new argument for something, right? So,
yeah.
One of my intro to philosophy classes, one of the best, like, learning, I don't know what you call them, not examples, but what am I trying to think? Where they try and get people to do things, whatever. Exercises, thank you. Was we had covered each side of the, I guess, teaching creationism in science classrooms debate, which basically most people, I assume, walked into that room already, like, having a belief about it before it was, expressed and articulated. But nevertheless, the arguments were given, and then the teacher had us raise our hands if you know, all right, creationism not in the science classroom, everyone raise your hands who believes, and then vice versa. All right, cool. So everyone who believed that creationism should be taught in the classroom moved to this side, and now argue that creationism shouldn't be taught in this classroom, or in the science classroom. And I thought that was fun, because I then was forced to think of the best, because I can't remember if there was a prize or if it was just winning, but I'm like, all right, fine. All the arguments we covered sucked because I already thought of them and dismissed them, but what's the best thing I can think of? Why on earth should we try and teach it? And I think
I've heard that called the ideological Turing test.
Yes.
When your opponent cannot tell if you are natively for or against the position by your argument.
Oh, man.
Oh, that's a fun one.
Yeah. Like, is he someone who hates this argument but is pretending to like it, or does he actually like it?
Right.
I have something for you to steal, man, and it's the next part of the question.
Ooh, before we get to that.
Oh, okay.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, since we got on the creationism thing, I think one of my favorite arguments for teaching creationism in the classroom is that it should always be taught by someone who is scientifically literate, so we can demonstrate this is how science works and this is why it's not science. Creationism is a perfect example of the traps you can fall into if you have a cursory knowledge of science, but you don't actually do it using the tools of the scientific method.
Oh man, I wish I had thought of that when I had this example. It was
well, but then then someone could tell obviously you are not for creationism.
But that wasn't the goal of the exercise. The goal of the exercise was just to argue for it, to argue for a position you disagreed with. And I think I settled on something. This was like 8 years ago. I'm trying to remember. I think I settled on something along the lines of pluralistic education or something. Teach, and I think I tried to think of the best form of teach both sides, and whatever. I only had a few minutes to think, but I think that's the best way to put it. Is yes, we should teach it, followed by an example of this is exactly how science isn't done. That would have been so awesome.
So moving on. So the next part is the Bayesian priors for any real life problem aren't available, and if you're estimating, how are you doing better than someone using their knowledge and intuition? So the way that I would respond to this, which is not at all steel manning, is that that the writer maybe is a little bit confused because we always go into things with Bayesian priors.
Yeah.
That's
the definition of what they are.
Yes, we always have we are constantly giving outcomes probabilities, right? So, and we update those as we become more experienced and
it's like
and have knowledge and the reason that we have intuition to draw on is intuition draws from our stores of knowledge and experience, which is our priors.
Yeah.
I would take it even easier than that and just say the commenter said that real life problems never have given Bayesian priors or something.
Yeah,
and that's just false.
Right, it's like he assumes Bayesian priors are a tag.
You are doing a bad job at steel manning.
Straw manning.
Well, I'm not going to straw man, but I'm going to look at it and then we can steel man it. But just looking at it as given. So I mean, it depends on the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So like, if I want to know the accuracy of my pregnancy test or someone else's pregnancy test, rather, mine probably wouldn't come up positive, but in general, although I have heard anecdotal stories of some types of testicular cancer giving positive results on pregnancy tests.
Fun.
So something to keep in mind.
Yes, we should all keep that in mind.
Don't quote me on that. We're not citing that. But the odds are given on the package and in the included documentation. So like, given a positive pregnancy test, with 98% probability that you're pregnant.
If it's within X number of days of your missed period.
Exactly. And so that's exactly the appropriate way to look at it, and then you get your prior from that. But then I'm assuming that in any real world problem, maybe they meant something like that you just encounter, without prep time. but I'm trying to think of an example where you likely wouldn't have any priors at all. Like, so I go out to start my car tomorrow and it doesn't start. Well, there are a lot of things, but I could look at what other issues I've had with it or something like that to give me a brace
would depend on how many times you'd run into this problem before.
And what sort of symptoms? Like, is it just not starting period? Is it doing this and not that? Like,
even if you are thrown into a position, for example, for me, it would be, which sports star do you think is going to win the game of, some random game? And I don't care about sports or know about any people. Even then, you have some priors because I would be able to say, I have no idea. So I'd be able to assign, what would it be? Like if there are two people, 50-50 would be my, I have no idea priors.
yeah. And then you could ask your sports savvy friend,
Exactly.
hey, who do you think this is? And then you can say, okay, well, how much are they savvy about sports, etc. and then exactly. But then you can update accordingly and say, well, they're
a big fan of this team, so they're always going to say they're going to win. So I can't use his knowledge.
Yeah. Or they've won their fantasy league every year for the last 8 years.
Ooh.
I'll bet 99%, or I'll bet 90% now that this person's going to win because that person knows what's up, and they're not motivated to lie to me about this. So, I mean,
you shouldn't go with 90% the person's going to win. You should go with whatever your friend said. If your friend said there's only 70% chance they're going to win.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, perfect.
So update your beliefs accordingly.
There's actually a really good, and this might be something worth diving into later with problems with Bayesian updating. But you can run into examples where like, that sort of reasoning, what does my friend think, and they tend to be reliable, can run into like, sort of wider problems. Like, I'm not sure what the percentage is. 70% of the world population is religious. Well, they can't all be idiots. So should I update in favor of becoming religious? Given that it's such a popular belief and they're so confident in it. But then that sort of runs into the problem because they're not arriving at that conclusion with Bayesian guidance. Right. So, I don't know, but I thought that's a fun counterexample that was worth exploring at some point.
I think, yes, totally. Okay, so let's go back to after all the, what was it?
So, after all, the Bayesian priors for any real-life problem aren't available, and if you're estimating, how are you doing better than someone using their knowledge and intuition? So our non-Steel Manning was that the author of the question is maybe a little bit confused about what we mean by Bayesian priors.
All right.
So, Steel Manning, what could they mean? What do you think they do mean by that?
For some reason, I thought this was the easiest part of their question to answer, and that's because like, so a well-informed expert will get things right more often than others because they have a better background to work with. Like that's just what it means. So like, I'm trying to think. Like chess grandmasters, they can speed through, and I'm gonna edit this out. I can't remember where I was going with this, but
I think this is actually the chess analogy good for Steel Manning. Would a perfectly rational Bayesian who is not a chess grandmaster, just kind of familiar with the rules, would he be better at chess than a non-Bayesian chess grandmaster?
So would Deep Blue be the chess grandmaster? Because Deep Blue only knows the rules,
right?
Yeah, and Deep Blue doesn't know anything else, right? So I think
but it can also go quickly, right?
I think Deep Blue went pretty quick. I'm not sure about the speed, but I bet, and that was 20 years ago. I'm sure the best chess playing computers now are crazy good. Yeah. We need to talk about how that computer won at Go sometime.
But what if you're a human being?
The one that does Go is a much bigger deal because, as far as I recall, Deep Blue just basically brute forced the problem, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because chess is like computable.
Yeah.
In a way that Go just isn't.
Right. So but you were asking.
So let's say that our perfect rationalist is a human being.
Yes.
And they're nearly perfect rationalist, but I think that, compared to somebody with deep experience, the truth is that it only works if they have the evidence that they need in order to process a solution, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
They have to have the input in order to make the output.
I think the perfect rationalist would expect to lose to the chess grandmaster.
Yes.
Because the chess grandmaster has a lot more knowledge and has those techniques, almost internalized, I would assume. I haven't met any almost internalized to the point of intuition, whereas the Bayesian doesn't have all of that experience on his side.
I think you're right. I think they'd probably bet on themselves losing.
Yeah.
But
And therefore win.
right, lose the game, win the bet. But the question of encountering, I guess, Bayesian priors. Read the sentence again.
The
Please.
Bayesian priors for any real-life problem aren't available. If you're estimating, how are you doing better than someone using their knowledge and intuition?
Well, you aren't. Everyone just uses their knowledge and intuition.
And I think that it's not being uncharitable to say that the first part of that question is factually incorrect, because the priors are given in a lot of cases.
I think the point with rationality is that if you are dedicated to epistemic rationality, you will have better knowledge, because you will have, weeded out the bad knowledge that you have and kept only the good stuff. And you will also tend to get better intuition, because you'll be able to figure out that, these intuitions usually don't work and I shouldn't rely on them. And these other intuitions tend to work better and I'll adopt them instead. Like, either way, you're working on knowledge and intuition, but if you apply the methods of rationality, you have generally, the hope is better knowledge and better intuition through the, rationality process.
I think that's a good answer. I've got nothing to add.
Okay. Shall we move on in the question?
Sure. Is that too arrogant sounding? I always feel like I sound like an arrogant prick when I say that
You're not saying
is the best way to get these things.
You're not saying I'm the rationality expert, and that's why I have everything I want.
I'm just trying to get a little bit better.
Well, because
these are the tools I use to get a little bit better when I can.
And I think that's a fair way of putting it, right? So and I'm not sure if it's unfair to put it this way or not, but what's the alternative? Yeah. So am I going to get there by other means, just trusting my friends over and over?
Your gut.
Yeah, but the thing is, what if your gut sucks? If your gut,
your gut does suck. That's the whole point of this.
But if
you can make your gut better,
exactly. And just using the example of chess again, they can intuit through a game. That's why you can play speed chess and kick ass if you're really good at chess. Because they're not even thinking about it. They can look at a board. They've seen it 100,000 times. They can just go right through it and play it, as fast as it takes to move the pieces. But the difference is that, I guess, what other things would you use to guide your decision making? I don't know.
The person tries to kind of clarify that previous sentence here by saying, I don't include empirical decision making as inherently rational here. So, for example, if GiveDirectly were the best charity, I see that as more of a data-driven outcome than a rational one. So I guess what they're saying is they don't see data evidence-based decision-making as inherently rational.
I challenge politely.
One of the most important
you challenge
tools...
what I'm saying about their...
No, what the assertion is, yeah.
One of the most important tools of rationality is data and empiricism.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so, if you don't count empirical decision-making as rationality, I think maybe it would be unfair to equate them.
Yeah. We may have just differing definitions, because rationality doesn't have a lock on data and empiricism.
Nope.
I mean, that's been with humans for a long time.
Right.
So maybe he's discounting it for that, but we use data and empiricism.
Or he's asking for examples outside of empirical data that count as rational decision making, because that sounds like a harder question, because we've had empiricists around, formal empiricists for at least, I think empiricism was the school of philosophy and starting in 1600. So there's been people dedicated to that for centuries, but they haven't been Bayesian rationalists.
No.
So I guess where does Bayesian rationality come in outside of empiricism? I think Bayesian rationality incorporates empiricism, but isn't equated with it.
Well, Bayesian rationality is a little bit different. So the way I was trying to explain it to my mom the other day was Bayesian rationality is like the difference between Bayesian statistics and the standard statistical model. Frequentist?
I believe, yeah.
Okay.
This is a term that I've seen anyway.
So, and we've seen it work better get closer to the truth in statistical models, which is why there's a huge movement towards using it in physics and genetics, right?
And it handles new problems better.
Yeah, and it's updating. It is updating your priors. It's updating your probabilities.
I don't want to.
Right, based on
Yes.
additional evidence.
Yes, it is. I don't want to paint Bayesianism as like the ultimate end all be all of statistics.
No, but just
but
a
I
little
think
bit
it's
better
another
than...
it's another tool that if you don't use it, you're handicapping yourself. But I've seen arguments for why Bayesianism isn't always the best way to go. That there's other ways of analyzing data as well.
Well, it depends on the problem too, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the fact that Bayesianism is getting a lot more. The reason I like Bayesianism a lot is because it is the formalized version of how I prefer everyone to think intuitively. That rather thinking in absolutes, you always think in probability distributions. And when you get into the nitty-gritty of which statistic is best, I'm not a scientist, or a statistician for that point, for that matter. So I don't want to lay down my flag and say, no, Bayesianism is better in all cases and this is why. But I think that Bayesianism has a lot going for it that if people applied it more to their day-to-day lives would help people update their beliefs, I guess.
Yeah, but at the
And
basic... But at the base, that's what it is. It's a statistical method, right? So it is, at its base, empirical, right?
Right, but we don't use it that way in our day-to-day life. I never put on an 80% chance that I'm going to get to work within my 15-minute window.
And why not? You could never be
I
late.
actually, but the thing is I do that every day, and that's why I leave 10 minutes early, right?
Right.
Because
no, I have a heuristic now for about how much time I need to get to work to be on time 90% of the time.
right. But I guess that was calibrated through that sort of updating.
Well, I think that
Like your
should
first step
try.
is to look at your phone. Well, it says it's a 36-minute trip, and then 55 minutes later you roll into the parking lot.
I started working this job before we had those smartphones that could tell you the minutes. So yeah, for me it was just a bunch of trial and error, and I updated a little bit every time.
But you should be, you do assign probabilities to things automatically.
Yeah, but not consciously.
Not consciously.
Yeah.
And two, it might help to make it more conscious.
It probably would, yes. So I'm still aspiring.
But then for me, the problem of always trying to put numbers on it is I always feel like I'm just like humoring myself. Because I'm not sure if this is 80% or 90% sure that I'll make it to work on time, but I'm pretty sure, and that's why I'm leaving now.
Keep doing it and you'll get better.
I guess maybe I should start writing it down or something.
Calibrate
Have you been doing
those. Nope.
Oh, okay.
Do you do it with anything?
Probably.
I
can't
keep
think
track
of
of
something. I can't think of something offhand, but I've definitely had conversations with friends in which I ask them to put down a probability on what they think is true.
I'm gonna take an example from my life of someone who I consider not entirely trustworthy. This is a coworker that whenever, no matter where she's working or who she's working with, it's always a terrible place and everyone's out to get her. And so I have a prior now that if she says something bad about her coworkers, it's probably a problem with her, and I'm not changing how I feel about the people she's talking about at all.
The horns effect.
Well, just from
You're falling in the hole.
No, just from my experience with her narrative of other people is not reliable, so I can't use it to update one way or the other.
I think the horns effect would be assuming the opposite of what she said, necessarily. Or I guess maybe a little bit.
It's assuming that since she is an unreliable person in general, and because you have this previous experience with her as an unreliable person, you're using your experience, but also it might be an emotional, like, oh, she's complaining again. I've had that with a coworker too. And you know what? It resulted in me not listening to some really good ideas.
No, well, I mean, yes, it would be, if it was something accounting related that I was dismissing because I was, used to dismissing her opinions on people, that would definitely be the horns effect. I trust her to do her job entirely well. It's just when she talks about other people, I don't pay attention to that. But I think that is where the probability comes in. I have assigned very little probability to what she's saying being accurate, and I still listen to it and kind of file it away, I guess. But I've never actually put I put 99% on her not being reliable when describing other people. I just think, I'm not going to pay attention to that. And I don't think people generally do think in numbers on those sorts of personal day-to-day issues.
I do think that the difference, though, between that and the Horns effect is that you're not looking at how do I feel about her, so that's how I'm going to assess what she's saying. You're saying how reliable has this person been in the past, so how am I going to assess what they're saying? And that, I think, is a much more sound way of looking at things. So if you have a really
It's a piece of evidence. The question is, how good is it?
Well, so like if you have like a really...
I've been working with her for 5 years.
Okay.
If you have a really reliable doctor with, great reviews online or something, you might trust their diagnosis more than your friend in med school who is getting straight D's.
Right. And so you're intuitively putting percentages on things, but you don't have actual numbers in your head.
You might even like your friend more.
Right.
But it's just, well, I'm in this area and on this topic, this person probably knows more. So, I don't know. But, yeah.
Was there anything else in the question that we have to address?
Let me just double check. I don't think so. So then they ended by... They ended by thanking you again for putting together the Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality podcast version, and they're very nice. And I thank them, and hopefully we'll get their Reddit name so we can thank them properly for submitting a question that we then pulled apart and probably terribly misinterpreted.
I would like to, I would first of all like to invite this person to, once they hear this, to write back and tell me if they think we addressed the question, if they think we were fair, if they have any follow-up questions. And really, anyone who's listening to this, if you have anything to say about this question, like, what did we miss? What would you have liked to have said if you were on this podcast? Or what should we address? Leave us a comment or something. We will read these, or send us an email. We'll totally read them on not online, but, on the podcast and respond to them.
Okay. How can they leave a comment, and how can they send us an email?
Go to thebayesianconspiracy.com and click on the comments for the episode that you want to comment on. Or they can send us an email at bayesianconspiracypodcast@gmail.com.
Unfortunately, the Bayesian conspiracy was taken.
Yes, it was.
Somehow.
Yes.
I think that was it. Did we have anything else we were going to...
No, if anyone else has any other questions, we've got like a list of topics that's going to keep us going for a year at our schedule. But if anyone wants to send any questions or anything, we will be glad to take them.
Thoughts, suggestions, comments, concerns.
Tell us how much we suck.
How we can make this better.
That the first step to getting better is knowing how much you suck.
But constructively.
Yeah, that's true. Don't be jerks.
All right.
Because I can't take any more jerkitude.
Hey!
I have nothing to contribute. Have we stopped?
Oh, wait. Before we go, we have to do our sign-off. Thanks for listening. I'm Eneasz.
I'm Katrina.
And I'm Steven. We'll see you next time on the Bayesian Conspiracy Podcast.
Ooh, tell them that we'll see them in 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah. We'll see you in 2 weeks on the next episode of the Bayesian Conspiracy Podcast.